it's different with every book, but like I think something that I've been trying to focus on is like that a lot of the spaces that we live in, whether we're talking about like San Francisco, or whether we're talking about like cinema or like online communities or gaming communities, like a lot of those spaces are very overlapping, even though they feel disparate. You know, so like when you at first glance you can be like, oh, like here are all these gamers, they play this game every night, and like it's their own thing and it's this like perfectly enclosed community, but so much of what happens in that world like kind of imprints on the world around it, and we end up like all living it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like that's just how culture works. It's sort of like transfers onto every surface that it touches. And like a lot of the things that I try to look at with my art is like the moments where like kind of the virtual and the physical sort of overlap, you know? And we just live with it. Like, so the San Francisco book, it's like when I look at that house in Pacific Heights, or that house in Potrero Hill, that is like the big blue house on the corner of Connecticut and like 22nd. And then I remember that it was used as the house in this erotic thriller called Pacific Heights with Michael Keaton. And then like my mind imprints on top of that, and I can only see that house. And then what happens is what happened just now, that I think that house is in Pacific Heights. You know, and it's like, that's a very literal example. But then there's more subtle things, like, or maybe not subtle, but like ethereal, like the fact, like today is this movie where I started watching a lot of like time travel films as like an organizational principle, and realized that this weird thing was happening where it's like, since film is a form of time travel, where like you sit in a chair and make a conscious decision to watch something for 2 hours, but within those 2 hours there's the time frame of the film, right? And that film can span 50 years, it can span 10 minutes, like it can, you know, it can be like Run Lola Run, where it's the same, you know, 20 minutes over and over again. It can be like 2001 A Space Odyssey, where it's like millennia, you know, like, so that the like that's where you start to see it in like a more kind of like subtle way. It's like, well, if that's how we experience time in film, like doesn't that kind of transfer over onto how we experience time in our life? Like where when we're engaged or focused on something, or when we're watching a movie, like time kind of like real time evaporates. And it's this weird thing, like where I don't think that they're very separate at all. Like we live most of our lives through engaging in other people's narratives.